Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public session of the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Halton District School Board on February 24, 2026. Please be advised that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the hdsb.ca and the HDSB YouTube channel. We have trustees both in person and online. In person, we have Trustee Bryden, Rocha, Baxter, Wubenhorst, Chair Collard, and Trustee Daniele. And joining us online is Trustee Zhang, and we're expecting Trustee Horn and Ahmed to join us shortly. And Director Ennis, can you tell us which staff are in attendance tonight?
We have the appropriate staff in the meeting and some online to support it as well.
Thank you. And joining us shortly will be Trustee Gray. As this is Committee of the Whole and less formal, we'll proceed with using our first names. And tonight, Donna will be honoring the traditional lands.
Thank you. We begin by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land upon which the HDSB is situated is on ancestral, treaty, and title lands of the Anishinaabeg, Ojibwe, and Michizagaig Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Michizagaig territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treaty obligations, duties, and responsibilities, and Indigenous rights, while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land.
Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. And I'll put the motion on the floor. Audrey, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
Yes, I would.
Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Seeing none, it is approved by unanimous consent. We will proceed to declarations of possible conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest with respect to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed to agenda item 4.0, and that's consent agenda. And under this item, we have for approval meeting of the Committee of the Whole minutes of November 18, 2025. And I'll put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the board approve the consent agenda action item as listed on the February 24, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. Carol, would you like to move a motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay. Does this item need to be pulled for discussion? Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, it's approved by unanimous consent. On to discussion items. Okay. Our first report is on 2026 trustee determination and distribution, and we'll invite General Manager Fred Thibault to present. As you know, under Ontario Regulation 412-00, it determines the number of trustees on a board based on the principle of representation by population. So Fred will share with us some of the options compared to status quo. And at the end of the report, you'll note that there are some draft motions that we'll need to consider at our upcoming board meeting. And I'll pass it over to Fred for the presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Oliver. Sorry, just logging into Authenticator here. So long and short of it, we have done the trustee distribution analysis for the 2026 municipal election. As you'll note in the report, we need to have this decision made by the end of March 31st and reported by April 3rd. Unfortunately, at this present time, we still haven't received formal instructions from the ministry. We haven't received the memo, and the 2026 trustee D&D report has yet to be circulated. So I just want to make note that we have relied on the 2022 guidelines, which should remain unchanged because, again, the legislation has not changed. But if there's any nuances there, again, they haven't been captured. We have had the report. It's currently under legal review just to make sure we're aligned. Had calls with legal today. It seems that we're on par and that things remain the same. So we just did a double check. In the report, you'll note that there are essentially for the town of Halton Hills as well as the town of Milton. We're not recommending any changes. The distribution of those areas are very much similar to what they were. Milton is growing in representation overall in the Halton region. However, I would say that's still not enough yet to warrant the addition of a third trustee. Halton Hills, again, we're looking at about just over one in terms of full representation. So similarly to, we're not getting anywhere near adding or removing. So I'd say for now, although Milton is what I would say underrepresented right now, or sorry, they're underrepresented with just two trustees. I think that's something we'll reassess in the 2030 municipal election as we continue to see that increase. Will we be to the point where we'd be a full transition from one municipality to another? I can't guarantee, but it might be something where we start looking at cross-jurisdictional, lower tier jurisdictional representation, just so we can balance out the numbers. So Milton unchanged, Halton Hills unchanged. Burlington and Oakville, we present a couple of options beyond the status quo. The exercise we undertook for those is that typically when we've first started looking at this more closely in 2014, we tried to implement a threshold of 0.2 of our electoral quotient difference. So that means that a specific geographic area that's made up of one or several wards does not go too far beyond one or too far below one. But given the fact that both Burlington and Oakville have a number of wards that isn't necessarily divisible by the number of trustees that are supposed to represent those, it's sometimes challenging to distribute it. So it's a little bit difficult for us to stick as close to one as possible when we're doing this distribution, while keeping very separate geographic areas and not having dual representation. So I'd say that as far as if the trustees' will is to continue having one singular representation for a collection of wards, the status quo for both Burlington and Oakville, I think remain most suitable in terms of keeping geographic areas contiguous to one another, having an electoral quotient that's generally acceptable. I'll note that although Oakville's a little bit better off, Burlington, we're seeing some larger variances. Nothing surpasses the appeal threshold of 0.55, so I have no concerns in proceeding with that. If you want to get closer to a one-to-one representation, and also just acknowledging too, like Burlington is always going to have some kind of over-under representation because it's not a full 4 trustees. What we could do is combine geographic areas together, so you'd have 2 trustees to a geographic area, so you'd have 2 trustees to 4 plus or minus wards. So we present 2 options for the city of Burlington where we make the numbers work out pretty well, where the variances are very well reduced beyond what they would be with a singular representation. And for Oakville, we do the same, providing some options. At the end of the day, I'd be more than happy to support whatever option you're willing to proceed with as presented in the report. If we're looking to just maintain things and some stability given the uncertainty, or just frankly, things are functioning well, and because we're representing not just our wards but the board as a whole, I wouldn't be concerned with proceeding with the status quo at this present time. Happy to take any questions with regards to the report, and we'll be coming back next Tuesday with the final action report and notifying the community soon after. We can also discuss at that point in time too if we hold off and see if we do receive anything from the ministry or higher orders. We do have till April 3rd to report this, so we have some options there as well.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question from Tanya.
Through you. For the Oakville, the section on Oakville, it refers to geographic area 10 and a made-up Ward 33. I had a hard time following that. What exactly is geographic area 10? Or where is it? I thought I would see a map of it, but I didn't see it.
So let me just load up the. Oh, let me just load up the. Sorry, bear with me here.
So Fred, it's referred to in figure 3 on, for Oakville, right under Ward 4. It says 33, and it's a very small population, and we're just wondering where that would be in Oakville.
Sorry, I want to answer the first question, but to your point, yeah. Where's the committee of the whole agenda? So I'll answer the first one as I'm trying to find this report. It's tweeting me out. There you are. Ward 33, I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you. I've reached out to MPAC, Ontario Elections, and I got to get in a hold with the town of Oakville. What I think it is a collection of individuals that they weren't able to map to a specific ward, so it's kind of the leftovers, if you want to call it something. So there's about 197, and one of the tables are wrong, but it's 197 individuals that aren't necessarily assigned to a particular ward. So the geographic area 10, to answer your second question, that one is in connection to, I think, Ward 4, where we just combine them together. So we're making sure that we're capturing all those that are showing up in the population electoral group report, which is presented as Appendix 5.1, and just combining it there.
And just to clarify for everybody, in Appendix 5.4, the numbers there are reversed because area Ward 33 should be 197, and Ward 4 in Oakville is the 26,000.
So geographic area 10 would be Ward 4. So if you were to look at, sorry, the internet's slow. If you were to look at figure 3 status quo, which is on page 9 of 51 of the report, you'll note that you'll have Ward 4 and 33 located there, so in the white highlighted areas. So geographic area 10 would combine those two together. So if you link that up with the map, then you'll see where it is. So geographic area 8 would be wards 1 and 2, geographic area 9, 3, and 6, et cetera, et cetera. And we have 11 geographic areas in total for 11 trustees.
Okay, next on the list, Robbie.
Thank you. The metric we operate by is the MPAC electoral register, which gives us the number of voters. And by that metric, Milton has about 64% of Burlington's population. When we look at total population, Milton's about 80%. And if you look at the number of students, Milton has as many as Burlington does. Which raises a little bit of a question of representation and whether we're doing this right in the number of trustees we have. So to your point, as Milton continues to grow, that shift may happen on an electoral basis. But looking at it now from the other pieces we have of looking at population or number of kids, we could ask the question: are we doing it right? And would it make any sense to consider a low population designation for Milton, to acknowledge that their large population of students is not counted in this metric?
I would say that no, in discussing it with legal counsel, and we can provide more detail on the March 3rd report. Low population areas are usually reserved for, let's say, larger board jurisdictions that might have very small municipalities as part of their representation, and that don't necessarily have enough of a electoral group population in order to bring it to a quotient of 1 or close to or within the appeal range. So in our particular situation, we have 4 area municipalities, all of which that have a pretty, I would say, sustainable population. All of them are beyond 1. So even Halton Hills, our smallest population, is still beyond the quotient of 1. An example I would use is if one of our adjacent rural municipalities, or let's say if Kilbride was its own municipality, that's where I would suggest a low population area, so we'd have representation for Kilbride, because you can't add trustees. You would just have to take from the existing pool of 11 and then redistribute based on that. So given that, I wouldn't recommend going with low population area. I think it runs kind of contrary to what the intent of that is, and that is typically reserved for smaller municipalities. If that were the case of what you're looking to do, and just to make sure that we're sticking to our thresholds for electoral quotients, because in the alternative, if we're removing a trustee from Burlington, then that would put Burlington in a minus 0.59 deficit in terms of their overall representation based on population. So if you look at figure 2, based on the overall PEG population of 121,000, of the 358, they should have 3.59 trustees. So if I drop them down to 3 and give 1 to Milton, our threshold of 0.55 would be surpassed by both. So if we were to do something, we would almost have to share a trustee between Milton and Burlington in an area that would make sense. So perhaps the northern area of Burlington, which is contiguous to Milton, and combining those wards in such a way where there'd be almost dual representation. The limiting factor for Milton too on that too, as I'm working through this in my head, is that historically when Milton had many more wards, I think it would have been a little bit easier to deal with, but now that it only has 4 wards, it's going to be hard to have that kind of representation, because you almost have to give up 2 of the wards, which equals well over 1, and then the Burlington wards are, if you're looking at them, I think they're all around the 0.6 mark, give or take, on average. Sorry, let me just look at the numbers before I say that. Yeah, 0.48, 0.60, 0.59, 0.64. And again, that makes sense that they're all close to 0.6, because then when they're doing this at a municipal stage, it's really based on the total population, whereas we're having to split this up between Catholic and public representation. So the apportionment between both parties may vary from ward to ward, and that's why you see a little bit more of a variance in the population distribution. They also account for potential future growth as well, which Ward 1 in Burlington, which is probably the lowest, is probably accounted for with the Aldershot expansion areas too. So, and Oakville would be a good example, would be Ward 7, I believe. So, in a long-winded way, and I apologize for that, is it's very challenging in doing it, and we'd almost have to be combining wards and having a lot of dual representation to make it work. Not to say that we can't, but I'd almost recommend let's wait a little bit longer, and then once we get closer to that threshold, then I think that's where we have a real discussion in 2030 about how we deal with this. And 2034 is when I think we're probably going to pass the threshold for population to get us to the 12th trustee eventually too. So that will also help in redistributing the populations.
Follow up?
Thanks, that's helpful, and the limitations on the other side. You talked about the measurement at the municipal level. All of the document here looks at measurement at the representative level, the geographic area level. Which one or both are challengeable or appealable?
It'd be on the geographic area level. So I use figure 2 as kind of the general scope of this area. You're splitting up that total quotient by 4, so you're never going to have all of them as one. So it's almost just acknowledging it up front, but it has to be based on the geographic area itself. So for argument's sake, if you said that you had Burlington, Halton Hills, Milton, and Oakville as 4 separate geographic areas, then you just have to, that's how you would assign the trustees. So then you're just further breaking that down on a municipal standpoint. So that would mean that Burlington, you'd have 4 trustees for the whole of Burlington representing it. Similar to what our Catholic board counterparts had pre-2018 or after 20. I forget when they went to wards. I don't know if it was with us or sorry. I don't recall when they changed.
If I may, Burlington went wards at least 2 terms ago, and I think Oakville, I'm not sure what's happening in Oakville with Catholic board. They
I
might
think
still
you're right.
be at large, or did they switch back? They switched back, yeah, because they found it unsustainable.
So yes to both your question in terms of you'd have to apply by geographic area because that's what we're approving. But the figure 2 gives you a metric of what the total number of trustees should be for that assigned area.
Yeah. So the ultimate conclusion is you would have less deviation from Burlington at the geographic area level if you had only 3 trustees in your figure. However, if you stuck a trustee into Milton, you would suddenly have more because you're dividing 4 by 3 instead of dividing 4 by 2. So it does not solve the problem.
Okay, Shini. Shini, you have a question? You're on the speakers list. Okay, we'll move on to Tanya.
Yes, so one thing I wanted to clarify on the report, so back again to Oakville. So I'm looking at figure 3 and figure 4, and I'm trying to map out the geographic areas as they relate to wards. So if I look at figure 3, wards 1 and 2 are geographic area 8, and wards 3 and 6 are geographic area 9. But in figure 4, if I look at wards 3 and 6, they're now geographic area 10, 11. Is that a typo, or if we're moving them, they now have a new geographic area?
Essentially what it's saying is it's combining geographic area 10 and 11. So, and this was brought up by legal counsel in terms of the clarity of this. So to clarify, what this is saying is that this area would be represented by 2 trustees. So you'd have a combination of 3, 5, 6, and 7 represented by 2 trustees, and then the other consolidated geographic area would be 1, 2, 4, and the leftovers of 33. And in doing that, you're reducing the variances of the electoral quotients, where it's pretty much Ward 4, which currently has a deficit of 0.2 or 0.21 if you include Ward 33. And in combining them, the variances drop down to 0.12 and minus 0.12. So it balances out and makes it more representative of the total population.
Yeah, no, so I guess my question is, in figure 4, should the bottom half of the chart, so wards 3, 5, 6, 7, should that not be geographic area 9, 11? Because in the above chart, wards 3, 6 is number 9.
I see. Okay, yeah, that wasn't the intent. I was just saying, like, because we technically should have 11 geographic areas in
Right.
total for the entire board. So no, I see what you're saying, though. You're associating it to the previous. No, because in other that wasn't the intent. Because in other iterations, those status quo wards might have been mixed up to not necessarily just be combining zones 9 and 11, like you pointed out. It was just looking at it just on the wards and putting them together to get to the best electoral quotient. So the geographic areas in table 3 and 4 are not meant to relate to one another. It's just saying that your 10th and 11th geographic area that we need to assign is going to be this consolidation of wards for 2 trustees.
Okay.
I could see the confusion though, and I appreciate. I just didn't want to do the opposite and just saying that this is geographic area 8 and 9 for the second one, because then it's almost seeming like, well, we've removed 2 geographic areas, when in fact it's 2 combined together. So
Okay,
yeah.
so there's no correlation.
There's not meant to be, because if there would have been, there were other iterations of Oakville where we were just mixing wards every which way just to make the quotients work out, but they didn't make sense geographically. So yeah, they're not meant to be tied to one another.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and Shini, you're on the speakers list. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I had a technical issue, and so I'm looking at the figure 6 and 7. So based on my understanding is in Burlington, then we will combine three wards for one trustee. So the total trustee of the boards will be reduced from 11 to 9. True, and because in last year in Burlington, Burlington changed the boundary of wards, and the change is basically Ward 4 and 3 are affected, and in Ward 4, one school is moved to Ward 3 in 2026. So this is a small change, and there's no other significant change, and because there's one portion in Ward 1 that's the low density area. So if we reduce the number of trustees, so the representation could be an issue. So if this is option 1 and option 2 both has this suggestion, so can we just stay with the current status quo? Thank you.
No, and I understand just the confusion here. Just to clarify, we're not looking at any reduction in trustees. It's just a matter of there would be 2 trustees representing those 3 wards, as opposed to, so you'll have kind of like a partner in your area of representation or in your geographic area. So Shini, as an example, in ward for figure 6, geographic area 4 and 5, which is comprised of wards 1, 2, and 4. You would have 2 trustees representing that area, not 1. So in that case here is with 2 trustees, which is your representation minus 1.67, would mean that you're overrepresented by 0.33. So we're keeping 11 trustees. It's just some of you would get partnered up to reduce the variance with the electoral quotient. So if you look at status quo, we've got a high of 0.41 in terms of the variance. In combining them, we're able to reduce that, depending on the option, as the second lowest of 0.33 or as low as 0.24 as a maximum variance. So that's the benefit in doing it, is a by the numbers approach. Is it necessarily the best outcome? I leave that up to trustees to decide.
Well, as I know, some boards is practicing the same theory, but it's for the entire board, not for the individual municipality. And for Halton and then only Burlington has each one distribution has 2 trustees. It will only cause confusion. That's my concern. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Amy.
Thanks. I agree with you entirely, Shinyi. I think it is very confusing for people when they are represented by multiple trustees. Which one do I contact, one or both? Do I contact them together or separately? Do I hope one gives me a different answer than the other one? Do I have a favorite? It becomes sometimes, I think that's why the Catholic Board tried it and then went back. Because the other problem for parents is that if you're covering that many wards, 3 or 4 wards with 2 trustees, those 2 trustees that get elected might actually live in very close proximity and know that section of the wards very well and not the other sections at all. So it becomes very problematic. People like to know that they're being represented from within their wards, and it's not perfect. Burlington has never been perfect on these alignments. I got to tell you, it's frustrating, because I know that there's not equity of numbers of schools or numbers of parents. However, as you pointed out, it is status quo, and that is what you recommend based on what has worked in the past. And yeah, it's until we get the 12th trustee, I think we're going to continue to have these kinds of issues. Once Milton has grown beyond where it is now, they'll get 3, we'll get 3, and then eventually Halton Hills will get 2. Because Jean has more schools than anybody and a larger area than anyone. So there is no real true equity, but I know that having gone through these a few times, that the way that the system is set up isn't about that. It's about where the voters live. And voters don't all have kids. And some people who can't vote have kids. So we don't really get true equity. It shouldn't be based on where the voters live. My 2 cents. But thank you very much. I know it's not fun putting these reports together.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Fred on this topic? Oh, Tanya, go ahead.
So my last question. So this is an information report for today, and with status quo and some suggestions. So am I to assume that at our next meeting, you want us to decide whether we want to go status quo, or if we want to take on one of your suggestions as far as Oakville and Burlington are impacted?
I would say that the purpose of this report tonight was just to show you that there are other options. I think we conclude that staff would be willing to support status quo given the state of things, and how I'm not sure that by the numbers is necessarily representative of the work that you do, and we're not into an appeal situation. We're past our thresholds, but operationally I know that you are representative of the whole. So long and short of it is I'm comfortable with status quo. I'm seeing around the horseshoe that for the most part, I think that's the direction that you're looking to take next Tuesday, which was going to be my last question to you. So if that's the case, the motion will read status quo. We will still present the options as being things that we've looked at, but through discussions at the committee of the whole meeting, we've concluded, not put words in your mouth, but this is what I'm going to write in my report, that we're just going to proceed with status quo for the time being and reassess. And the next election, once we have an increase in population and maybe a closer distribution of representation. So that's what I'm thinking, but if you want to tell me otherwise, I'm all ears.
And Robbie.
I had lowered my hand because I was going to say I support status quo.
Okay, thank you very much. I personally would be in favor of status quo, so that's the option I will be supporting. Okay, thank you for your presentation, all the work on this. Next up for discussion, we have a report on transportation policy with Superintendent Nagoy.
Thank you, and for the Vice Chair. The transportation policy has undergone some changes. There are no implications to eligibility or distance. It is more in terms of the process for calculation that has been suggested to be removed, and instead is making reference to the operating procedures from HSTS, which are aligned with the parameters that are set out in terms of eligibility. It also is now consistent with the coterminous board and their suggested changes, and it's in the new format for the template. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Roxana? And we have some. Robbie, go ahead.
A fairly pedantic one. In that new template, we don't have a requirements section. My suggestion would be to move that wholesale into the policy statement. The policy statement is intended to be this is the content of the policy, and that's what the requirements is spelling out.
Okay, Amy?
Will the changes to the policy, which I understand are timely, somewhat urgent, will there be any impact to student riders at all? Because that's the only thing that parents are going to be concerned about.
Thank you. And no, the answer is no. So there's no changes to eligibility or how we currently do things. It's just taking away some of the detail, which causes sometimes it's not clear and confusion. It also does add some clarification in terms of the appeal process. It's for eligible students as opposed to courtesy riders, for example. The appeal process is not for that. So we're just trying to be more clear, but also to provide the links to the HSTS operating procedures, which provide a lot more detail on the process, expectation, contact, and things like that.
Thank you.
Carol?
Yeah, thank you. Through you. So in the references, the first two APs, this is just sort of administrative thing. The first two APs belong to us, the board, and the links don't work right now, and that's presumably just due to the website refresh. So just a note that in the clean copy that those links have to be updated. And I just wanted to ask about the, which is the AP? The video surveillance one. So that's the section that was added to the policy, just clarifying that there is video surveillance on the buses and references that AP. And I just wanted to ask, because that one is up for review this year in 2026. And I just wanted to ask, is it going to get legal review when it's reviewed by staff to make sure it's still meeting the privacy laws and the expectations around that? Because I know that's something that parents are concerned about, is just around the videos on the bus and how that comes into play with our privacy rules within the board, and then how that is overseen by the privacy laws and whether we're in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So in terms of what we have on the bus, most of our buses are equipped with internal cameras when the buses are running. It is an extension of the school day, so it's the same regulation and privacy rules apply as it does for the physical buildings. So from that perspective, and the same sort of chain of custody and who has access to see what redacted information. So it goes through our privacy and records management office in terms of a review and requests. So we have very specific delineation of who is requesting, who can view, what portion of a particular video recording can be shared if it's with a third party that wants to see certain things or not. So from that perspective, we follow the same rules. And when we do review the video surveillance, if we feel something has changed, we would engage legal, but we do certainly look at the MFIPA and PFIPA and all of those regulations in conjunction with our privacy office.
Okay, and next on the list, Jean.
Thank you very much. I wanted to share a quick story with trustees, some of whom are new and wouldn't have experienced this, but a number of years ago we had a real boil over up in the hills when the transportation services had been for years and years and years offering transportation for kids who were typically ineligible, but because there were no sidewalks built in the area, transportation was offered. And so there was a bubble up, and when it was finally discovered that the sidewalks had been in for a couple of years and that really these students shouldn't get transportation anymore. I was so satisfied with the response of the HSTS in that they rectified their process going forward, in that they send out a letter every spring, or if it's not spring, in the fall, to say your child's currently on a bus that really you're typically not eligible for, but because of the circumstances in your community, we are providing busing for this short period. But it could be reviewed and changed at any time. So I think that transparency was really well worked over and certainly helped a lot up in the hills. They saw that as a reasonable response. I look at under number 4, guiding principles, subsection number 5. The HDSB is committed to communicating with parents and guardians in a timely manner any transportation changes that may occur. Timely is really a term, and I don't know if you were starting in on that over there, Amy. Timely is a term that could be widespread, right? Timely could be a month before or 2 months before, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to the parents to know like a half a year ahead that if their kids were not going to be getting the transportation that they thought that they may be getting. So I really hope that there is that underlying understanding that timely can't be fast enough for our parents. But here's my question. And my question is about, would we ever come to a point here in our board, in conjunction with the Catholic District School Board, where we might need to review the distance where students qualify for transportation? And if we had to do that review of distance, at what point in the year would that happen and under what circumstance? With a board that has yet to see its funding for next year in transportation, just wonder when that would ever occur, or at what point in the year that might occur.
Thank you for that question and comment. And so to the first part, yes, timely is important, and the process is in the spring, usually in April. We send letters with proposed changes. If there's a change to eligibility that has been for a number of years, we do offer a full year, so they would get, that next year is your last year, and then again the following year, now the changes will be implemented. So as a result of that one situation you mentioned, we do make sure that if there's more significant change, there's that full year of upfront review, but also that we mention every year to those parents that are on a temporary busing situation. We remind them this is temporary and annually reviewed. So as soon as the infrastructure is in place, we will be removing. So we have a couple of those. So these parents already had their years, right? So we've already done it every year. But if it's something new, like we have a new exception that is going to be removed, then we would provide that annual, that year of additional notification, so that they can make alternate plans. With the reduction, with regards to eligibility distance, that's something that we have looked at this year. We've done a full optimization study. One of the scenarios was if we increase the distance and opened up all the bell times, and what would that look like? So there's quite a lot of changes in terms of that bell times for all the families, and with the distance, you could be looking at saving some funding, but we wouldn't be aligned with the funding parameters. So right now we're aligned with the funding parameters in the formula. If we went higher, so less eligible students, less runs, it might also impact the funding, because we do send simulations of how many routes and how many buses we have based on our population of eligible riders. So if there's fewer, then the funding gets adjusted as well. So it wouldn't necessarily result in one-to-one savings. So we look at that from time to time, especially in the years when the funding changes or our financial situation changes, and we have. So that is not one of the recommendations for next year. But should we be recommending changes to the eligibility, it would not be this spring for September. It would always be at least a full year ahead, because of the significant changes that will entail for the system, for the families, and so forth.
I don't see anybody else on those speakers list. Does anybody have any final questions or comments for Oksana on this policy? Seeing none, we'll move to the next present or report, and that's the much anticipated 2026-27 budget development update with Superintendent Nagoy, and I'll invite Roxana to present. Oh, and yes, I did. Thank you very much. And you have the presentation attached in your package. Thank you.
All right. So we do have an update for 26-27 budget development process. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to do a quick overview of where we are from a timeline perspective, a quick review of our current landscape in terms of financial pressures, and the budget overview, what our goal is for 26-27, and then spend most of the time just looking through where we are in terms of identified reductions, efficiencies, and where we're going next. So we've redeveloped a little bit the presentation to try to make it a bit more simple, but capture our situation and what are the main challenges. So in terms of the timeline process, we did have our kickoff in October, and between October and December had quite an extensive consultation process. The public consultation then extended into January. So we are continuing those discussions with the Board of Trustees. Discussions are continued at the Special Education Advisory Committee through February and up until May, when we hope to have a draft budget. So all the proposed reductions or savings that we are discussing during this time, they are draft. There are no final decisions necessarily. We are missing a couple of important information pieces in terms of the core education funding, if there's any changes, and where our March 31st enrollment would be. So do we have to update the enrollment forecast for the following year, and so forth. So as we're going through the next few months will be critical to see where we would land. But we wanted to make sure that we provide you with as much information in terms of where we're heading, and have the ability to discuss your concerns and answer your questions. So from that perspective, we are going to bring to the board on March 3rd the survey results, public survey results. I have a quick sneak peek in this presentation, and we're going to be hoping to see a release of the core education funding in April. So what are our main funding pressures? And you've seen these before. They're just summarized in this slide. And the main ones are with relates to reallocation of special education funding, the unfunded enhancements to statutory benefits, increase in WSIB claims, the supply costs exceeding the allocation of funding, not keeping up with the inflation and market impact on costs of operating costs in particular, and technology, learning materials, and the elimination of the underutilized schools. So you can see that there's quite some significant impacts in terms of funding changes over the last few years that have resulted in the HTSB having a structural deficit. And this is in addition to the impact of declining enrollment. So what is our current picture? Total annual budget, and this is looking at the budget estimates cycle. is 970 million. We have 7.1 million deficit in the current year, with the enrollment expected to decline next year as well by about 600 students. We do project that we will need to look for savings of 10 to 14 million, in addition to the direct impacts of staffing that are based on class size ratios and direct enrollment ratios, in order to balance for next year. I think it's important to just have a quick reminder that we are and have always focused most of our funding on supporting students directly and on instruction. So 97.8% of our total budget is spent in this regard. And, how are we funded? 92.6% of our funding comes from the province of Ontario for the Ministry of Education. Most of that is through core education funding and other one-time provincial funds. And then 7.4 million is in other sources of revenue, and that is mainly school-generated funds, international students, rentals, interest revenue. And this is the only area that we have a bit of discretion in terms of focusing to find opportunities for increase in other revenue that will then help reduce the amount of reductions and savings that we need to look to balance the budget. And how do we spend that funding? You'll see that almost 82% is on instruction, directly supporting the students. About 15.9% is spent on school operations, maintenance and groundskeeping, and student transportation. And 2.2% is spent on board administration. So how are we in terms of compared to funding? How do we spend our budget compared to funding? So there are three categories: where we are aligned with funding, where we are above funding allocation, and where we are below. So we are closely aligned to funding when it comes to classroom teachers, school administration, and student transportation. Above funding for supply costs and benefits, that includes the WSIB claims increases as well as statutory benefits that are unfunded. That's our major pressure in terms of budget and financial pressure. And below the funding allocation, we're looking at library and guidance, school operations and maintenance, and school board administration. So just a quick synopsis of our current efforts in engagement. We have, since October, we've conducted 23 budget workshops with over 500 attendees, and 116 ideas were generated and considered. So through the budget working groups that met multiple times, we really looked at all of these ideas and said, okay, if we are going to implement them, what would that mean? What would be the consequences? How would we make it work? So we gave each idea the time and consideration that it needed. The public information session from January 19th was garnered about 450 views. There were 35 questions or themes that were answered, and the answers are also provided on our website. And the budget survey has almost 3,200 responses. I'm very happy to say that the student voice, it's gone up quite significantly. Over 750 of the respondents are from our students. So we're still looking at some of the results. Although we have, the themes, we want to look at, in particularly, what are our students saying? What was their message, as opposed to just the collated results. So the top priorities overall, and more information to come at the March report. The top priorities from our survey respondents are focused on student learning and achievement, safe schools, special education, school repairs and maintenance, and student mental health and well-being. So a lot of the comments that we've received, both from the public as well as our budget workshops, have asked, are you considering other things outside of staffing when you're looking at reductions? And the answer is yes, absolutely. That's the first thing that we're trying to do, look at everything else first. So we have looked at all of the operating budgets to find efficiencies, our central budgets, corporate budgets, the school operations and maintenance, which is with our facility services and planning, the school decentralized budgets, everything that we have in terms of the non-staffing allocation was reviewed, and there were quite a number of reductions and efficiencies that we've identified, which I have in a slide coming up. So some of the things that we're planning to do includes changing some of the delivery and offering of our PD to reduce overall costs, but also making sure that we continue to build capacity with our staff, reviewing what tools and resources we are using, how efficient they are, which ones could be similar or a duplicate, and eliminating some of those as we go forward. Looking at device ratios and peripherals within a school, within a department, and what makes sense. Sometimes if schools have more school-generated funds, they may have a higher, a lower ratio for the students with more devices than other schools. So just doing a little bit of that review, because that has also an ongoing carrying cost. We are taking a different approach of courier services and planning for that, using some of our trucks and drivers that the facility services uses for their work. So we're going to make some use of that to reduce overall costs, automated where we can to create efficiencies, bundling our services and procurement as much as we can. We are in discussions with a number of vendors as well about discounts in terms of renewal. So to the extent that we can facilitate some of those changes, we certainly are taking every opportunity. Student transportation, we spoke in the previous item as well. So we've done a route optimization study, and we're going to continue with our annual efficiency review as well. And then containing costs from an attendance support program and process. So what does that look like? So to date, and this is a draft and a moving target. Again, I just wanted to mention that. We're looking at all of the efficiencies that we can from a vacancies, position gapping, supply cost optimization. So that's around $2 million. From a school operations and maintenance category within our facility services, there are a number of efficiencies that have been identified. They do not impact the repairs and maintenance, for example, the operating cost, the operating budget for maintaining our schools and school grounds, but it's more looking at building automation, just to be tied to the hours of operation of the school. So if a school is open later because it's got rentals, then it will stay later, but not all schools have to stay open until that day if they don't have events in the afternoon. So just being very careful in terms of some of those efficiencies. Just removing some storage and leases that we no longer need, using our internal spaces, and things like that. So we've identified about 1.8 million in that, with, from our perspective, minimal impact on the repairs, maintenance, and renewal budget for the schools that we currently have. So there's a lot of other items here. Every department was tasked with providing efficiency, so you can see them all listed here. All in all, we've identified 5.5 million. in potential operating efficiencies. Oh, jumping ahead. So revenue generating opportunities are the next area of focus that we want to maximize. We've identified to date about 1.6 million in additional revenue. So if you recall from that pie chart that we had in the prior slide, 92-93% is from core education funding. That is mostly impacted by student enrollment, so that's not what this is focusing on. So the first point really is looking at ensuring that we offer the best programs and support to our students, and we're focusing on student retention. So that is not factored here yet. We're going to be watching through the next few months where registrations land and how that might impact total revenue. But what we are looking at here is international students, increasing in rentals and leases, expanding some of the programming, and all in all, we're looking at about 1.6 million. So with that in mind, we do have a remaining target. So if we're looking at that 10 to 14 million, so at the 14 million higher end, if we have to go to that extent, we have almost 6.9 million remaining in target. So the next part of the review is reviewing all of our staffing. So that is something that certainly is part of looking at that remaining target and how we're going to be identifying some additional reductions. So all staffing groups, what I can share is that all staffing groups have been reviewed and are considered. All vacancies and temporary assignments. We're looking at the efficient allocation of certain staffing ratios. So all of these areas are on the list for review and consideration when it comes to potential staffing reductions. We are not in a position right now to share publicly a list. We're still working through it. And at the May Committee of the Whole, we would have a list of where we're going to end up in terms of the draft budget. So these are all in addition to declining enrollment that will also impact the number of classroom teachers. So if we have lower elementary or secondary enrollment, then obviously there's a proportional reduction in the classroom teachers based on student population. Similar with the kindergarten classes, if there's a reduction in those, it could impact the number of ECEs, early childhood educators, and other school support ratios that are based directly on the school enrollment. So those are all in addition to that 6.9 million remaining target. So that's where we are right now, and we do have certain areas that are identifying and taking us to that end goal. We are hopeful that the enrollment will be more positive, so we will be gaining some additional students than what we expect in terms of that declining enrollment for next year. So we will be continuing our discussions, waiting to hear from the ministry on the core education funding for next April, this April for next year, and continuing the discussions with SEAC as well. So board approval for the budget is in June, draft June 2nd, and the final board report is planned for June 16th. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Roxana, for this very thorough, comprehensive, and really well put together update for us. Are there any questions for Roxana? Tanya.
Two questions I have. On slide 8, when the priorities were listed, Number 2 was safe schools. What are the items that fall under safe schools?
So we would have to look a little bit more. So more detail will come in the board report in March. But Safe School really is looking at the school, the environment, how supported the students feel, overall inclusion. So there's different aspects that could be the perception of, do I feel safe and supported in school? But we would have to look at some of the comments in the results as well.
And then my second question, I was at a school meeting not that long ago, and a parent brought up a great point that we're always looking to eliminate the deficit, but what are our ideas to generate more income? One of the ideas thrown about was, is there a possibility of the school board hosting summer camps during the summer? Because kids are out of school for 2 months. Summer camps are at a premium to try to put your kids somewhere for 2 months. Has the school board looked at the possibility of offering some sort of summer camps at a fee for students, and that way our schools are being used, and it would be a way to generate income? So just wondering if that's been considered at all.
Thank you for that. And yes, that is one of the things that we are looking at, in particularly for our younger population, and boosting the kindergarten enrollment as well. So through our before and after program, it is being it's something that we are looking into. So we have a number of items that we are reviewing that may or may not be ready to be implemented in time for the following year, and therefore we didn't contemplate a number in terms of potential revenue generating. So we what we have to look at is, you know, the space, the cost of keeping that school open, the additional staffing costs, what would be the fee, and where do you break even, and then if you would generate something in addition. So we don't have all that information necessarily, but it is one of the ideas that is contemplated.
Okay, next up, Amy.
Thanks for this presentation. I love the way you've put it together, nice and clear and concise. It's easy to follow. My concern is when we talk about making things more efficient, one of the things that we see every year is that job positions by attrition is something that we count on. I'm always concerned what that looks like in the average classroom. Not replacing someone who is retired or left the board is still a body, an adult, trained, professional person that's no longer at the board. And some of these people have decades of experience. So that's always a concern for me, that we're losing all of those years of experience when someone retires. And I know that some of these people are replaced by newer graduates, and they bring a whole vitality and energy and new pedagogy, and so there's a plus minus there. And because they're starting at the new end of the grid, it's a little bit more cost savings for us. But again, I always wonder what that looks like in the average school. Let's say the average school loses 2 bodies, whether it's a teacher, an ECE, an EA, an administrator. Do we ever hear from parents that there's been an impact to their student distance learning. I know we hear quite often about the loss of EAs or an insufficient number of EAs, or my child has an IEP and they share their EA with another student, which I know is a practice that's done throughout the province. Without the funding that's required in order to maintain our schools at their current level, I'm concerned that what we're doing is resulting in not the same caliber of education that we're accustomed to providing in Halton. And I'm also concerned with some of the reallocation of work that is being proposed. I don't know exactly what that looks like either, and I'm very much aware that we're going into a year of negotiations, and if reallocating work is going to be palatable or not to our federations, I don't want to poke the bear, but I really want to understand what this looks like at a school, and I want to understand how we're going to be able to go into negotiations with our federation partners this coming fall, given this is like the 6th or 7th year in a row where we're moving in this direction, and yeah, it's concerning.
So thank you for the comment. In terms of the declining enrollment and staffing ratio, so that teacher in the classroom, the concept behind that is that if we're losing 20-25 students in a school, we don't have that class and those students. So the proportions of staff to students remains the same. The support for students remains the same. If we're looking at some reductions to those centrally deployed supports that work with students and staff, what would happen is potentially is less of an allocation to a school than currently, less days, less number of hours, whatever it could be, and then shuffle based on which school, which situation requires more of that attention. So that's in theory how that would work. So I'm not sure if my colleagues would want to offer additional comments, but that's declining enrollment means less students as well, so that will mean less staff that support the body of students. And thank you for the comment about the slides. I did want to mention, I should have mentioned at the beginning, I'm an accountant, so I'm not the designer of these slides, and I want to thank the communication and engagements team as well as the research team for providing a new perspective on presenting the data.
Just one thing I would add, just one thing, Amy, is that the staffing allocations that we receive are funding from the ministry. Historically, we have provided rich overfunding ratios to schools. I can think of a couple come to mind: kindergarten, special education, where we have traditionally and historically provided greater staffing ratios than the ministry funds us for. In a climate of declining enrollment and deficit budgets, I don't think we have the same luxury or latitude that we've had in the past. And so it's one of the realities of trying to get to a balanced budget. And I know that some boards that achieve balanced budget achieve it through ensuring that their resources and resourcing is matched and correlates with the funding that they receive.
Thank you very much for that response, and I just want to say that that doesn't mean that it's right.
Thank you. Next up, Carol.
Thank you, through you. I can sort of answer that question that you'd ask, Amy, just as an aside. I have heard from parents who are concerned about the changing faces in the schools, and specifically around older male teachers who are retiring. And I've had a couple of parents reach out to me to express concern that they would like our schools to, as much as possible, reflect the identities of our students, which we also, I think, have as a philosophy on the board. And they were highlighting that there was this, I don't know if it was a particular school, and that would be a question I think you would ask across the board, but just anecdotally in my area, that there had been some retirements or soon to retire older male teachers, and that was impacting how some of the students in the school saw the staff in terms of reflecting their identities. So it's an interesting thing that you brought up, and I've recently had a few conversations about it, and then, of course, sent it off to the superintendent, as I do. I don't know. So I just had a question, and thank you, Director Ennis, for mentioning the idea of sort of class sizes and providing what we're funded for. One of the questions I've had asked, and I'm going to ask you, I think I've brought it up before, but I'll ask you because your answers are always better than mine. I was around the CPP-EI thing. I think it kind of strikes people, and I've had a few ask me about it, because the ministry, if you look at the website, describes how schools are funded or how education is funded, and it's based on a certain number of students and the ratios of staff to students. So is it that we are not receiving the funding to cover those mandatory deductions for CPP and EI for the staff that we have at those ratios, maximum ratios? Or you were mentioning that, and Director Ennis has just talked about how we are spending above our funding allocation on our central supports, centrally deployed student support. So is that where we're short the funding? Is it for those sort of extra, I don't want to call them extra because they're needed, but the extra staff that we are allocating, is that where we're short the revenue to pay for those deductions because the ministry is not really mandating that we have them? Is that kind of the issue? Thank you.
Thank you, and through the Vice Chair. So there's a two-tier answer, I think, to that. The funding, yes, mostly based on enrollment. So when we say based on enrollment, it will generate based on the formula how many staff per so many students you get in various categories. So if you're funded for 100 staff, let's say it's 100 teachers or 20 ECEs or something like that, based on the enrollment, what that means is then we have an average salary cost and a percentage of benefits that's associated with the number of funded FTEs. So when there's a increase in benefits or statutory benefits, and this is mandated by the federal government, which we have to implement. The idea would have been that that benefit percentage would change to capture that, but it hasn't changed. So we're still funded with the same percent on that average salary. Now, it gets a bit more complicated because depending on the staff that we have or their grouping, they could be on a grid. So then the average salary gets adjusted up and down to where the staff is on the grid. So it gets a bit more complicated than that. But the percentage of benefits hasn't changed. So for the number of funded staff, in total, in all the formulas, because some formulas don't have a breakdown between operating and staff, like the school operations and maintenance is a big amount, and it's not split between this is how much is for staffing and this is how much. Same with special education is table amounts and statistical models. It doesn't tell you you're funded for these many EAs or certs or things like that. But based on where we can see it, and it hasn't changed, so the funded number of staff have not been funded for the enhancements to CPP and EI. And then on the flip side, if we do have more staff than funded, they're not funded altogether. So it's a two-tier answer.
Thank you. And over to you, Robbie.
Thank you. I have a small question and a bigger thought. And the small question is, there's a line in here that says recovery of extracurricular activities through school-generated funds. could you tell us more about what that would entail? And I'm particularly curious if that will impose barriers on students to participate in activities.
Thank you. So in the past, we have been able to, through some reciprocal agreements, we were covering some rentals with the municipalities of ice and sports fields for extracurriculars. So we've done an analysis, and in order to free up some of those costs, so we don't have to look at additional reductions, there's going to be some additional fees for those interested in some of those sports, and some will be absorbed by school decentralized budgets. So it's a mixed approach in terms of how we would look at this. So that's essentially the SGF, so the school generated funds fee for some of those sports will be higher next year.
Thank you. And I want to weave together some of the threads that have been laid out here in the overarching picture that I think you've done well in this slide deck to basically say, look, we found about $5.5 million of efficiencies that are going to have minimal impacts on student services. And we think, and I'm going to put an emphasis on the think here because it's less solid, that we can find another $1.5 million in additional revenue. And that leaves us with a hole, depending on how big it is, that we expect is going to be somewhere between $3 and $7 million that is coming out of the core supports that run our education system, the day-to-day staff that are providing extra literacy supports, are providing those smaller special ed classes that, to Amy's point, we have traditionally provided in Halton. That's been the quality education that we are used to providing in our classrooms. And back to our director's point, this is beyond the ministry's allocation, and we have been able to do that because we have spent less on our facilities and on our board administration than we've been allocated, and we found efficiencies and ways to get by on those pieces to allow us to invest in better education in classrooms. But that environment has changed because we're $6 million short on those CPP contributions, because supply costs and WSIB costs have gone up right across the province. We have no control over that, and we have to pay it. And there's been no funding to match that. Now, even though we continue to spend less on board administration and our facilities, we are facing a situation where we're no longer able to provide the same level of supports that we have been providing. That's the reality at the end of the day, and that's what our current provincial funding is leading us toward. And that's the item that I think everyone in this room is concerned about, and that's looking at changes for next year that are going to impact negatively some of the quality of education that we provide. I still think that our teachers, our support staff will continue to do phenomenal work, but we're stretching their capacity and taking away some of these supports.
Thank you very much, Robbie. Over to you, Jean.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions here. Given that the money that we receive from the Ministry of Education has largely to do with, the largest percentage of what we spend is of course on salaries and what have you, but we recognize that the funding flow to us is very much dependent upon the size of our enrollment. And I know that this year we had a committee that looked at attraction and retention of students, and that's a positive for us. My question is this: do we have another committee that is actively looking at cost reducing grants? Example, if there's grants out there for solar, that if we put solar panels on a school, then we would reduce our costs for the energy consumption, things like that. That may be a long shot because I'm not sure how energy, like how efficient that is in terms of saving a lot of money quickly. I think it takes lots of years, but are we committing ourselves to finding other sources of revenue out there that might help to defray some of the costs?
Thank you, Trustee Gray, for the question. We do always keep in mind in terms of what can we do. There's very little that we can do outside of the core education funding. So for the Education Act, we're quite limited in terms of what we can offer for a fee or what we can engage in. And so forth. We do have a few solar panels and some projects that we've been doing over the years. It does not generate, revenue or anything like that. And you have to couple that with the ongoing maintenance of, panels and so forth. I'm not sure if my colleague, Superintendent Godet wants to explain more, but I'm not sure about the grants that would be available at the one point in time, but looking at efficiency, building efficiency is one of the top priorities when we do any upgrades to our systems. The ceiling of the windows being more efficient, the roof, the insulation, and so forth. So those kind of projects is where we see operating savings. And some of the other things that we are looking at is not for next year because it takes time, is making sure that we can we get out of certain buildings and move people into existing buildings so that we don't have, for example, if we have a surplus property and we don't have a need for it anymore, maintaining an empty building is expensive. Maintaining a half empty building is expensive. So we're certainly looking through that lens, New Street, Pearson, what are we going to do in the future? So from that perspective, there's a lot of grants that are offered for small businesses or the private sector that we would not be eligible for. So that's not really something that would be significant for a school board, but certainly that if we have an opportunity to partner or do anything where we would have some savings, we would consider those.
Second question.
Hang on, Ian, I see you've turned your camera on. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, thanks. I would just add to Superintendent Ngoy's comments that unfortunately, yes, the some of the incentives to do solar systems on our roof don't exist any longer. There is an opportunity to leverage capital that generates some savings on the operating side, but the payback is quite a lengthy payback period. And we do have 5, and it does generate some offsetting revenues that reduce our operating budget. But we have also encountered problems connecting to some of our jurisdictions. They're not, in all cases, not ready to receive for their electrical inputs from our schools.
Okay, if I could ask my second question. The Ministry of Education has been in the papers recently and along the lines of making statements like, we want to ensure that all the money that comes into our boards of education directly impacts student achievement and performance, and so on and so forth. As we go through this process, my question is the ministry aware of all of the steps that we are taking as a board to gather information and good advice from our parents and find out through surveys what they think is important, and then going through all of the different steps we are doing to develop this budget? Is the ministry aware of all the steps that we're taking and all the efficiencies we're trying to find? But ultimately, efficiencies to me also refers to cuts, and adjustments and things like that. I sometimes wonder that they should probably sit at the table with our people and look at the devastating impact after a day of finding efficiencies and what lies on the floor as we try to find those millions of dollars of savings just to be able to balance a budget that is never meant to be balanced from the beginning when there's not enough money coming in to make it work. So have we ever invited the ministry to sit with us and say, let's look at how this is working out here? It might be an interesting, they're very much about supervising boards. Maybe they'd like to have a view from the inside. And I mean that quite sincerely, a view from the inside of what, a day in the life of trying to make a balanced budget when you never get enough to start with.
So what I could offer in terms of reporting, we do have reporting back to ministry staff. So that's where our reporting goes. So we do have requirements to submit every so often through the budget process where we are, what we're identifying. So they're aware from that perspective. And when we can, give them the various details. So they follow along from that perspective, and then how that reporting goes up through the minister's office. It does. I'm just not sure the frequency and so forth. So that's what I would offer. We do have various avenues to communicate. So we communicate staff to staff. We have great relationships where we are able to reach out, voice concerns, ask for clarification or direction, whether it is, my staff, whether it is my colleagues provincially, so the superintendents of business, whether it's the directors, whether it's OPSPA. So those are sort of the channels in voicing some concerns in terms of the trend or what's on the ground, what we see on the ground, and just raising some flags that way.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anybody else on the speakers list. Thank you so much for this great presentation. I do have a couple of questions for clarity. On slide 9, the last point, school decentralized budgets, and then on slide 10, third last, review the use of summer students. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that or provide examples. Thank you.
Thank you. So the decentralized budgets are the operating budgets for schools. So each school has an allocation based on their size and some individual needs. So we are looking at whether or not there was anything that we could identify as changes. The recommendation right now is not to make changes to any of the elementary decentralized budgets, but to do a little bit of recovery of the extracurricular from the larger secondary budgets. But it's not significant. The most significant part is going to be going through school generated funds, so collecting fees for extracurricular. So that's really where we're looking in terms of impact. About, I think we had decentralized school budgets for secondary identified at 80,000. So overall, elementary and secondary budgets are 13-14 million. So, about maybe half of that could be the secondary budget. So when you're looking at 80,000, is not a significant amount per school that we would be clawing back for covering some of those extracurriculars that remain in their budgets. With regards to summer students, so various areas or departments have summer students that are employed, and in particular they could help the departments during times that they're busy or times when there's a lot of vacation and overlap. So we really are looking at, do we maintain all that level of engagement in summer students, or take it back and do without in the coming years.
Thank you very much. Roxana, thanks for this great presentation. And I thank you and your team for the wonderful work that you're doing. There's a lot of detail here. There's a lot of work that you need and a lot of things you need to look at as you're assessing how to best balance our budget. And we really, truly appreciate that and your expertise and the collaborative relationship that you hold with ministry staff as you work through this. So thank you very much for that. And I think we're ready to move on to our next agenda item. Thank you. Yeah. Shall we take a recess, 5-minute recess? Okay, thank you. We'll see you back at 7:40. Okay, thank you. So we will resume with our agenda. We're on to agenda item 5.4, and that's board correspondence. So before we start, trustees, you will recall that in September, we passed the motion to direct the chair to write a letter to the Premier and Minister of Education with copy to key education stakeholders regarding the work of school board trustees and student trustees in fulfilling the mandates of the board as set out in Ontario Education Act. This letter also asked that the minister conduct public consultation before making any changes to Education Act regarding the role of trustees. Recently, we received through the chair 2 letters from the chair of Waterloo District School Board. One letter is directed to the Ontario Ombudsman asking for a formal review of the proposed removal of English public school board trustees. And the second letter is directed to the Minister of Education requesting a province-wide consultation or referendum before any final decision is made to eliminate English public school board trustees. Several trustees here have expressed interest in having a discussion related to this correspondence. And so I will open the floor for a discussion. But before I do so, I would like to remind trustees to monitor their speaking time. I firmly believe that each of us here has the best interests and intentions, holding what is best for every student and what has the greatest positive impact on student achievement and well-being at the very heart and core of what we do as HDSB trustees. And now I will look to the speakers list, and I'll begin with Donna. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I read the letters from Waterloo with interest, and I know that other school boards are having this exact same discussion. And I would propose that we as the HDSB write a very similar letter to the Waterloo letter to the Minister of Education and also to the Ombudsman. And I am going to do this because I'm going to publicly state that on something I believe the Minister of Education may be correct. The role of trustee is the oldest democratically elected position, I believe, in Ontario, well over 100 years old. Perhaps it is time for a review. Perhaps it is time to look at that governance and see if it is still standing the test of time after over 100 years. Because I will be honest, I have worked with well over 24 trustees since I began. They're no longer at this table. And there have been good trustees and there have been great trustees, but they're no longer at this table because this is not about the person in the role. This is about the role of trustees and the crucial part trustees play in student achievement and well-being and increasing public confidence in education. And I believe that if the minister were to go out and do a broad consultation with town halls across the province to hear from the little towns outside Sudbury as well as the large urban centers of Toronto or Ottawa, hear from everyone what is going well, what should be continued, what should be changed, because there could very well be some tweaks that are needed. So a broad consultation on student achievement, student well-being, increasing that confidence in public education, I think is crucial. We just had a presentation on our budget, and we are small potatoes when you consider us up against the provincial government, but we had over 3,000 survey responses, 23 budget workshops with 500 attendees, public information sessions with 450 views, just within our small corner of Halton. Imagine the data and the response that he would be able to get through the public consultation that the Waterloo District School Board has been suggesting. And I think in the end, he would end up with a system that is better for all the stakeholders in Ontario, our students, our families, everyone that they serve. Again, coming back to our chief goal, student achievement and well-being and public confidence in education. So that's my soapbox as to why I believe we should write a similar letter.
Thank you very much, Donna. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this topic? Okay, Carol.
Thank you. Through you. So we already wrote to the minister in September. Amy took the lead and I think wrote a very good letter with our input. We had a conversation here and we'd written a letter, and one of the things I advocated for that was included was a request for a public consultation. So exactly as you described it, Donna. And we talked about, you know, the benefits of trustee-based governance. And I'm wondering if we're going to reach out again, if we should have sort of a different message, because he's already heard that from us. And so I'm wondering, you know, should we be asking that any announcement of a change clearly articulates answers to the concerns that he's seen in the letters, including ours, around what the new governance model would look like? We can express support for innovation and improvement, which I think is, we'd all agree on that. And then also, I wonder if we should relay an expectation to ensure that trustees, assuming our position is maintained, is provided with, or are provided with all of the knowledge and training to fulfill our roles. Obviously, as a parent and a taxpayer, I'm concerned when I hear the minister placing boards under supervision and talking about failures of governance. And my assumption is that those boards were not intentionally neglecting their duties for good governance. So perhaps we should ask or strongly suggest that the ministry better support trustees going forward with training, practical training. When we look at the international and Canadian perspectives around nonprofit governance, there's a move in many jurisdictions to competency-based boards. So the ministry has a strong role to play in providing centralized training to make sure that all of the boards in Ontario are working from the same place in terms of knowledge and training. So again, I think, you know, the request for consultation we've already made. So from us as the HDSB, perhaps a letter that's expressing, you know, our positive views, as you had said, Donna, around innovation and moving forward in education, but also making some suggestions around addressing some of the issues that he's raised, and perhaps that would be better received. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing those ideas. And now we'll move on to, is it Jean or Tanya? Jean.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I totally agree with Donna's comments and Carol's yours backing those comments. I think back to when this government came in a number of years ago, I guess 2 terms ago, maybe in their 3rd term, 2 terms. One of the first things that this government did was they expanded upon the need for community consultation on the physical and health education curriculum. And they were going to do the broadest, largest communication and consultation ever. So I take that as an indicator that this government actually does like to consult. We haven't seen it lately on this particular issue, but perhaps given that they do have that track record, publicly speaking, that how important it is, that perhaps maybe through this that they would consider again that this is something worthy of going out to the community to learn more about how we could make this better. I think we are in alignment with the government. We want to make things better, stronger, effective, more effective. So let's get together and let's find out how to do it. That would be my comments.
Thank you, Jean. And next, Amy.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the comments that have been made this evening. And I would say that I am very much in favor of a letter as well. I do believe that showing support for the original letter is the primary objective because this is a province-wide effort. I don't think we want to change the recipe too much. It's okay to add a few things on there, and as with the last letter, I would be looking for broad consultation amongst my trustee colleagues to make sure that all voices are heard in this letter. Would require a motion to come to our board meeting next week. I'm okay with writing that motion, but if someone else wants to write that motion, I'm also very happy to accept that. because there are many good voices at this table, and not all of them have to be channeled through me. So if someone else wanted to take on the task of writing that motion, that would be lovely. And the words that you expressed this evening, Donna, I think would make an excellent motion. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you all on putting together the best letter we can as a board. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see anybody else on the speakers list. So thank you for bringing this forward. We have a plan of action. And Donna, thank you for offering to draft the motion. I'm happy to assist you if you'd like. And so this item will be coming back to the board meeting next Tuesday, to our March board meeting. Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll move on to committee updates, starting with board assessment and development, and that's Carol.
Thank you. Through you, I sent a written report. There's quite a bit to cover, so I've sent a written report to all trustees. So hopefully you found that in your inbox. I think it was Monday morning. So just quickly, the governance procedure for trustee expenses mandates annual governance PD, and you've all received emails and confirmation from Manager Khan, and that is booked. So that's just a quick update. There was also a PD opportunities survey that went out to all trustees with a list of several options of courses that are usually offered to staff and facilitated in-house by board staff. And all trustees were asked to indicate their interest. So there were 8 trustees that completed the survey. And you can see in the report, there were identified by Amy, a member of our committee, the top 3 choices. And the first one was something called Crucial Conversations. So we were going to go ahead and start looking for dates to get that booked. But then we're told by staff that actually is a 2-day course. So not something that really fits into our usual PD, which is 2 hours. Sorry, it's a little short. To do 2 days. Well, I mean, well, yes, that's a good point too. So that moves us down to, that could be for a future term. That moves us down to the next 2 top options, which were courses that are called the Leadership Continuum and Exploring Your Leadership. So what the committee was hoping in the short time that we have in this meeting is to get an idea if anyone has any comments around preferences. Alternatively, I can also send out an email and just ask trustees to weigh in. First, is there still an interest in this type of sort of personal development PD, I guess you would call it? And if so, what would be the choice between those 2 other options, which have been confirmed by staff can be done in the window that we have available? So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts they wanted to share now, or I can just send out an email to get feedback on that. So again, if there's any changes in whether or not trustees want to participate in this type of PD at all, please obviously let us know. And then I'll be asking for some choices between those other 2 options. And then just one thing I wanted to update trustees on to let you know that this is coming is the idea of the development of a PD resource guide. So we're nearing the end of our term. Some trustees have been at the table for more than 1 term. Some of us are on our first, but I know we've all taken part in various types of professional development. And so we were thinking to serve the future board, the next term, to create a resource guide of the type of PD that we have engaged in that we would recommend to others. And Manager Khan has kindly offered to create this and then maintain this resource for continuity in the director's office. So you'll be seeing some communication about that as well. Canvas of your feedback on the PD that you've received and anything that you might recommend to future boards so that we put together a nice onboarding package for the next term of trustees. And I think that's it for an update from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And next up, an update from Financial Advocacy Standing Committee, and that's Robbie. Sorry, did you have a question, Tanya?
So I thought we were going to have questions. Yeah, sorry. My fault. I wasn't quick enough at the button. So thanks for putting the report together. It's nice to have all the information in one place. My concern, as much as I love PD, as long as it's intentional and it serves a purpose for the people around the horseshoe, now that the first one is out of the question and we're down to the two last ones, the leadership continuing and exploring your leadership. Based on their description, I would probably be interested in the last one. But I'm also looking at the number of people who expressed an interest in taking this particular PD session. So I don't know if this is a good fit for this last year of our term and possibly ever. But I'm also looking at how much time we have left in our term, and I'm debating, should we look at this perhaps, cross my fingers, past November timeframe? Reason being is in March we have a PD session on governance, which is crucial to our role. And then we're looking at April, May, June, when we have our calendars are full based on what's coming down the pipe with year-end events, and our attention is needed elsewhere. So I'm a bit worried about a full attendance at any of these PD sessions. And then that brings me, let's do it September, October. But come September, October, if trustees continue to exist, that's also election season. And is it really worthwhile doing any PD session knowing that we may not come back after November 15th? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you for the report, but I think at this point, me personally, I'm going to decline participation in any of this proposed PD based on the known events and also the unknown events of the fall. So that's where my head is at as far as PD. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the kind of input that we were looking for as a committee. So thank you. I just, as you were talking about the titles, I quickly looked back at the report that I actually did write. And I noticed the Exploring Your Leadership, which was the last one you said you would be interested if there was time. It talks about creating a Lumina Spark portrait. I believe that was done, correct? And I don't think I was here for it. I think that was a combo staff trustee PD, and I missed it. Okay, so that one maybe we've already done anyway. Okay.
That's why we put that next.
For the next term, yes, absolutely, I agree. The other, when you were talking about the amount of work that's coming, I believe there's also some policies that need to be updated and approved in September, October of 2026. So that's more work that we haven't quite anticipated yet. So fair point, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move to update from the Financial Advocacy Committee.
Thank you. The Financial Advocacy Committee will be meeting on Wednesday of next week. I circulated a survey to trustees for input on some possible directions for the committee. We have not yet received responses from everyone and would greatly appreciate that. So if you have not yet responded, please do so. If you could do so by the end of this week, then we can use that information in our next committee meeting. I'll send around an email reminder as well. But that input would be greatly appreciated as we help to try and lift up the questions we were talking about earlier this evening.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Carol?
Thank you, through you. I just had a question about the committee. I don't think we've really talked about the plans for the committee in terms of the work that you're doing. I know you said you're meeting and you ask us for some input, but I'm just wondering, when I looked at the terms of reference of the committee, it talked about, I think there were 3 items in there, and 2 of them were advocacy outside of the community. I believe it was MPPs and the Minister of Education. And I'm just wondering if any of that has been done or if there's plans for that. And if advocacy to the minister, well, actually both, I guess, is being contemplated. I remember you, Robbie, had asked a really good question in the fall around potential issues with the funding formula, because the minister himself had said that in supervised boards, if the supervisor was seeing problems with the funding formula, that he was expecting to hear about that. And I don't think we've heard anything since. But, you know, some of the discussions we've had tonight, we're talking about a growing board can do certain things that a shrinking board can't. There's obviously some efficiency that comes in there. You know, the loss of one student reduces funding, but doesn't necessarily reduce our costs. And then conversely, the addition of a student increases our funding and may not significantly increase costs. So I'm just wondering if you're considering any advocacy at the MPP minister level, and if so, would the funding formula be a part of that? Thank you.
Thank you. In the short run, the focus has been more on community and on that component, but it was certainly suggested by one of the survey respondents that we take a look at the MPP component and potentially pursue that as well. I know some of those conversations are happening informally between trustees around the table and their local MPPs, but it's something that the committee can take a solid look at. It came up in the last meeting, but there wasn't a decision on it. And to the question about the funding formula, I think having Superintendent Nagoy at the table when we consider that could put something interesting together in a question of, you know, Halton for many years has been the beneficiary of being a growing board, and do we want to ask the question of whether there are adjustments to the funding formula that might make sense to more evenly balance between growing and declining boards and the actual, you know, there are costs and when you have a growing board, the issue was that the revenue received may exceed the marginal cost, and whether there's a tweak to the formula that might be needed there. So that's something we could certainly take away to take a look at.
Thank you for that. The other element, I think, of the terms of reference is this idea of public or community advocacy. And I think the board, like staff themselves, are doing a really good job of that in terms of all of the budget consultations have included information about budget pressures. There was I call them webinars, but it's the wrong term, but there was it was kind of a webinar, right? That was, yeah. Recently that I watched, I thought it was very well done, thank you. And again, budget pressures and the realities, I think, were really well presented by staff who are in the best place to talk about those things. So, and that information, the surveys all go out to parents, school councils, like those people I think are quite aware of the issues. It's that piece of communicating where, you know, the idea of politicians talk to politicians. So is trustee time and trustee resources best spent trying to do that advocacy directly to our, I would say, provincial counterparts, although I don't know that's quite fair, as opposed to the community work, which I think staff are already doing a really good job on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7, and that's trustee questions of clarification. Sorry, what? Oh, sorry. Yes, I missed one standing committee, and that's policy, bylaw, and governance, and that's Robbie again.
Yeah, I foolishly signed up to chair 2 committees, and I'm confusing you in the process. Policy, bylaw, and governance has a full docket of work reviewing policies that are due for comprehensive review this year, and a couple that have been ongoing from the previous year's term as well. The goal is to plow through you should be seeing the revisions to the bylaw shortly, and the appointments and other rules, which you saw a draft of previously, should be coming to board soon. So those are two of the ones at the top of the list, and there's additional to come later in the year.
Any questions for this standing committee for OB? Seeing none, now we will move on to item 7, which is trustee questions of clarification for this agenda. Are there any? Not seeing any, we'll move on to trustee news. Not seeing any, we will rise into private session regarding financial matters. Trustee Bryden, would you like to make the motion to rise into private?
Yes, please.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we will rise into private. Thank you. Okay, we are now back in public session of the Committee of the Whole, but before we adjourn, we need to approve the absence of Trustee Horn, and I need a mover and a seconder for this motion. Donna moves this motion and Carol seconds. We will proceed to vote. The motion will appear on your screen. Yeah. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do a vote, show of hands. All in favor of approving? How about those online? In favor, thank you.
In favor.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. The agenda for the Committee of the Whole session has been completed, and I call this meeting adjourned. I thank staff for